Okay, I'm Mac McCarthy and I help people with their breakups, and we just had some technical difficulties. But we're back on deck. It's going to be a gem of a show, and we're interviewing the great Clutch from The Truth of Love. I'm going to be calling him quite quickly, and we're going to be going over PUA Tactics, pickup artist tactics, and how they relate to today's dating scene, and also just diving into what it is to be a pickup artist, how he started out being that way or choosing that lifestyle. So we were about 5-6 minutes in and there was no sound. If you're coming on right now, I got 2 on deck. Let me know there's some sound. I believe it's coming in now, which is great. So, yep, we're good. We are good, folks. Here we go. 6 on deck, right on. Let's get into it. Is this live? Yeah, it's live. Can you hear me, Petty Betty? Is it clear? Is it crystal? Is this live? Yeah, it's going to be live. So, let me call up the great Clutch here. And okay. Give me a moment here, folks. Just try to call him and it didn't come through right away. There it goes. Thanks for sticking with me. Here we go. All right.
Hello.
Technical difficulties, I think, are okay now. So
Here, let me hear it on my side just to be certain.
yeah.
Okay.
And I had to erase the other live stream that was up too, just because it confuses the hell out of people.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Good, excellent. So I'm glad we caught that when we did.
Yeah, we were in mid conversation.
Yeah.
Like, wait.
Yeah. It's like someone was like, I kept seeing people come on the live stream and then go off, and I'm like, oh wow, I thought this would be a popular topic. So anyhow, Chuckster, if you're out there, thanks for letting me get the heads up that there's no sound after 4 or 5 minutes instead of just bailing. But anyhow, we're going to get into pickup artist tactics and how they relate to today's dating scene, but also a little deeper into how Clutch, dare I say, became a pickup artist, got into the community, as he calls it, and how you would actually, consider yourself a PUA or a pickup artist. So start out with, I think what you were talking about before is just how you got into it. And your age range, and then what it led to, and I'll let you go from there. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, like most people in my early 20s, you start discovering pretty quickly your level of independence. And like what I was mentioning previously is that there's a lot of misconceptions with pickup artists because, especially in social media or certain, glamour magazines, they have this portrayal of men that just want to go out and get laid. And it's not always the case, because what it was for me anyways was it was a gateway into understanding the opposite sex. Because for me, I grew up in a household full of women. I never had that male presence at home. So, my father, who lived in a different household, like, he'd come to visit on weekends and we talk about women. But there's a very big dynamic shift between talking about women versus learning how to attract a woman, learning how to read her body language, learning how to flirt. Like, people usually give you a rough idea, like what we usually call naturals in the industry, where people that are just naturally good at picking up women. But if you sit them down with a pen and paper and say, all right, list every single thing that you did in order to get there, they have absolutely no idea. It's something that's just integrated into their psyche. It's almost like a subconscious thought. So all pickup artistry does is take those concepts and put them into a formula. Now, does that mean that everyone abides by the same formula? No, you have different interpretations, different prospects. But what really attracted to me was look, I grew up in a single parent household. My mother, did the best she could. Like, she has her flaws, don't get me wrong. We've talked about that in other videos. But she did her best given the instructions that she knew, and how she knew how to run the situation. But what she didn't know was how to incorporate this masculinity in me, which really showed itself later on in life. And a lot of people that enter this market, specifically, at least in the community that I knew, I'd say 90% of them grew up in single mother households, because there was never that dynamic of, this is how you talk to women, this is how you carry yourself. This is where, I think a lot of the nice guy mentality comes from. Not saying that, this is strictly a woman problem. It's just to say that what we are taught at a very young age, especially when it comes to the dynamics of how to speak to and treat the opposite sex, it's something that's been really lacking in the last 20 to 30 years, especially as, more households are from single parents. More children aren't exposed to the same things that they were used to being exposed to, such as scrutiny or high level of conflict growing up. Like, I grew up around bullies. And I'm not saying that bullying doesn't exist today, but it doesn't exist to the same level it did back then. And say what you want about bullying, it being a negative impact. Like, we all know that stick and stones may break my bones, but words don't hurt me is utter crap. But what it does teach is, it teaches the concept of social hierarchies. It teaches the concept about being dominant. And that's a very, I would say, a very important role when it comes to building attraction. Like, to build attraction with a woman, it's not just being nice. And this is where there's often misconception with what pickup artistry is, because, like, most people think, oh, it's just a guy acting like a douchebag. Well, not necessarily. What it is it's a guy having a sense of character. And obviously some people take it to an extreme level. But what it actually teaches people is, it teaches people how to communicate at a sexual level, which is not something that's taught in school. It's not something that's taught among friends, especially if your friends are socially awkward. It's normally taught between fathers and sons. But with the lacking of a male authority figure, a lot of these men, myself included, lack that skill set. And to its credit, this community taught me a lot about how to interact with the opposite sex, which I think is a very good skill set for people to learn.
What did you mean by to be more sexual?
Well, there's a concept of, I would say, underlying communication. So when you're flirting with someone, what does flirting mean to you exactly? Like, flirting means like a little banter back and forth. But true flirting comes from being able to indirectly provoke sexual attraction. How does that work? Well, it can work a number of ways. It can come through the form of teasing. It can come through the form of sexual innuendos. It can even come in the form of being witty. But it's not something that you were ever really taught by the women in your household. It's normally something that you incorporate by viewing the men in your life.
Well, you're not going to learn it from your mom and your sisters, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you normally see the men do it. So it's not like your dad will sit you down and say, this is how you talk to a woman. But you will see your dad flirt with that girl across the street. You will see your dad flirt with your mother, if, assuming they're still dynamically together. It's these small little cues that you don't notice. And a lot of these cues, like, there is a formula for it, by the way, but a lot of these cues are exactly what those men are lacking. Like, this is the foundation of incel culture, after all, because it's men that have been involuntarily celibate for so long, because they're screaming for a level of reinforcement. But a lot of these men don't know where to start. And that's what the community offered. It offered sort of a blanket for people like myself who wanted to have more interactions with the opposite sex, but didn't really know how to.
So what was your gateway into the community?
Well, the game obviously came out, and that was a big game changer, no pun intended.
The book.
But
just so people know what you're talking about, the book by Neil Strauss called The Game. Okay.
Yes. So yeah, Neil Strauss is a journalist. I believe he's worked with Rolling Stone magazines. He's also worked with the New York Times. And he's released a number of books that I think are really good. But the most popular one is The Game. And what The Game is, it's essentially a first-person perspective of this corny journalist who took his life and basically took it from someone who is very passive, someone who didn't know how to talk to women, and over the course of a few years was able to approach a number of high value women and, sleep with them and get to know them and build relationships with them. And it just teaches the whole psychological process of how do you go from someone who is socially awkward in every situation, which, by the way, was totally me at 20, to someone who is fairly confident in their own shoes, who can enter a brand new city and approach the most beautiful woman in the room, who essentially knows how to run the dynamics of any social situation. Because the funny part is that a lot of people think that the Venusian arts, as we call it, has to do with women. And most of it does, don't get me wrong. Like, people enter it with the idea of, I'm going to sleep with many women. Most of them, by the way, coming out of a really bad relationship or recently being dumped. But what it also teaches you is it teaches you how to speak to people. It teaches you how to respect hierarchies, how to move up the corporate world. Like, there's so many skill sets that are associated with it that partially relate to sex, but more than anything, just teach you how to interact with human beings in the ways that we don't necessarily analyze. So being able to predict people's emotional reactions, for example, is a big one, because when you're dealing with someone who's used to a certain level of respect or a certain level of authority, let's say like a boss at work, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, who is that CEO going to pay attention to? Are they going to pay attention to the loyal drone that always does what they say and follows the order in line? Or are they going to pay attention to someone that speaks up and isn't afraid to speak their mind and is able to push a dynamic and push an agenda and provide proof to that agenda why their decision or why their course of action is the correct one? These are the people that move up in the corporate world. That's not something that's taught in school. Like, you can take an undergrad in economics or business. Nothing's going to teach you more than a real life example of dealing with people on a one-on-one basis. Like, that's something that only experience can teach you. And that's something that, in my experience, the community did provide for me. It provided me a blueprint to know how to better interact with my fellow men.
Would this be associated? My next question would be, what is the formula that you came across? Obviously, there's probably different formulas for different situations. But just while you were talking there, one thing that popped up in my head. Have you ever read the book Influence by I think it's James Caldini?
Influence. Let me look at the title. I'm more of a visual guy.
But anyhow, I'm wondering if that crosses paths with what you're talking about, as far as you're saying that you learned a lot of deeper ways to communicate outside of just picking up women from this community and formula. So my next question would be, what are some of the formulas?
Oh, you're talking about how to win friends and influence people? Is that what you're talking about?
No, there's a book called Influence by James Caldini. How to Win Friends and Influence by People by Dale Carnegie, which is a classic old one. I found that it was extremely simplistic to me. I felt like, I already know all this.
I found that book incredibly manipulative, actually.
Oh, really? I just found it. There's some books that sometimes you read them and then you go, I kind of already know this. Doesn't mean it's a bad book. Doesn't mean it's a bad book. It just means, for me, it wasn't a book that I found a lot of value, and I felt like I had, already known those things. So it's funny. Someone can spend a whole chapter on in a book saying it's really good to learn people's names. I was like, wow. I mean, and it becomes it's like a cult classic. I was like, wow, there's a whole chapter on remembering someone's name. I was like, I've always done that, but some other people don't do it. So, but anyways, getting back to the, I don't want to get off topic, but getting back to what are some of the formulas? Because I think that's something that people would be interested in knowing.
Well, the thing with formulas is that the formulas have changed over time.
Okay.
And rightfully so. Like, when I was neck deep in the industry, it was all about the Mystery method, which, for those of you that don't know, Mystery was a pickup artist that was based in Toronto, Canada. And he's essentially considered one of the godfathers of modern pickup, although there are other people that predate him. But essentially what he did, and this is according to his account, he essentially was a socially awkward guy. and decided, you know what, I'm going to figure out how to be the cool guy in the room. So he would force himself to go to clubs and bars every single night, like learning with people. Like, and he'd crash and burn all the time, but over time, he came up with what he called his perfected formula of how to interact with women. And these are broken down into 9 different steps. If you guys want to read about it, you easily can. It's called the mystery method. And what it is, it's breaking down interactions into different stages. So you have your A stage, which is basically your attraction building stage. You have your C stage, which is your comfort building stage. And then you have your S stage, which is your seduction stage. And each one of these stages has a different intention behind it. So you remember a couple of calls ago or a couple of videos ago where I said, like, I've concluded that pickup artists are nothing more than a bunch of fearfuls teaching anxious men how to pick up dismissives.
Say that again.
That pickup artists is a bunch of fearful avoidants teaching anxious men how to pick up dismissive avoidance.
Okay.
Yeah. The reason for that is that specifically in the A stage, in the attraction building stage, the first thing that we talk about is we talk about the approach. So when you go up to someone, but we also talk about A2, which is what we call demonstration of higher value. So part of the aspects of going up to, let's say, someone who's a beautiful woman. Let's say a woman, and let's take a rough estimate here. She's an attractive woman. So how long do you think she's been that attractive for? Let's take a conservative estimate and say she's probably been that attractive since she was 18. Well, if she's been that attractive since she was 18, how many times do you think that a woman's been approached in a given day? Like, if you had to roughly estimate.
And she's how old now? 23, 22?
Well, let's just take an average 18-year-old. How many times in a given day? Like, we're talking like a 9 or a 10. How many times in a given day do you think she's been approached?
Man, I have no clue. I wouldn't even know how to think about that right now. But because I'm thinking about times now with everything being online, I just don't think people are approached that much. So, I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? What do you guys think in the live stream? How many times? I mean, how many times? So it depends on where they work. It depends on but you're just saying she's highly attractive, right?
Yeah,
she's highly attractive.
I would say I'd say a conservative estimate. Let's say, she works in a retail setting, which is a very common thing, or works in a bar. That's an even bigger one.
Yeah.
If she works in a bar.
Well, then if she works in a bar, just to interject, I mean, I was home back home. I go back home every year, but years back, and a friend had taken me to what I would call like a dive bar, or I actually call them sometimes I call them alcoholics bars, because it's the place that every guy goes to at like 5 p.m. when they get off work. You know what I mean? And they're there. It's not happy hour. It's just like kind of and there's one bartender that's a woman, and there's no other women in there. It's all guys. And I'm just kind of like, wow, this is the place everyone hangs out. But that bartender would get hit on just because she's the only woman. I don't even know if she was that attractive, but if she was attractive, I mean, 10, 15, 20 times, and by the way, the whole time she's cat pawing them away, just kind of pushing them off and playing with them and loving it all the way. But yeah, if in that kind of environment, the bar being the bartender, and oh my goodness. And then you really elevate the numbers.
Well, the funny part is, and this is just based on my experience, and I've conversed with women, both women I've dated as well as women I've just randomly met. The estimate for an attractive woman is anywhere between 20 to 100 times in a given day.
What?
At least. Yes. If she's let's say she's a 9 or a 10.
Well, I mean, you got to keep in, like, she must work at the mall or something back in the day.
Sure, but still, like, that estimate is not that far fetched. Like, imagine you're working at a bar, you're serving people, you're serving drinks. How many times are you going to get hit on? Maybe 1 out of every 5 clients. How many clients do you serve in an hour? Maybe 20. Okay, so you're telling me you get hit on 5 times every hour. You have a full 8-hour shift. That's 40 times before your shift's done, not including the interactions you have on the street, not including the interactions you have on a platform like, let's say, Facebook, for example, or, the random people that through school or, through colleagues. Like, there's a high level of attention going on there. And the result of that is that women that are this attractive have developed a defense against it.
Okay.
That defense is being bitchy. How many times have you? How many
We can
times
just
have
put
you approached the beautiful?
Azam,
Yeah,
we
go
could
ahead.
just put the numbers aside, whether it's 40, 50, 80, or 100. They're just approached a lot. Anything more than 10 is far-fetched, he believes. Regardless, I know where you're going with this as far as, they're approached a lot, right? And they have guys coming up to them all the time. And this becomes a defense mechanism because they're annoyed by lame attempts. So
Yes.
let's just put the numbers aside and trying to figure that out, because it's hard. To be honest with you, it's hard to fathom right now because it's just not the dynamic in the world right now, right? Like, I can't picture it. But I do think it would be based on where they work, right? Or if they were in university or something like that where they're coming across more people. But putting that to the side, I see where you're going with the idea that they develop a bitchiness because they're annoyed by how many people are, it's like an annoying salesman, right?
Well, put yourself in their position. Like, and I'm not saying I defend some of these actions. Like, I've met some really bitchy people in my day. But imagine that let's take a conservative number. Let's say it's maybe an average of 10, because I see people being like, there's no way that's that high. Guys, I've met people where it's that high, and I believe them when they say it's that high, because I've been out with these people and they've been stopped. The element is, look, even if it's 10 times a day, which basically means for once an hour while they're outside of the house, someone approaches them and wants to have a full conversation with them. And sure, like when you're 17 and 18, that's cute. But that's cute for maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Like, after the 5th or 6th week, like, guys are just approaching. You're like, just leave me the fuck alone. Like, I just want to get my stuff done. I just want to be left alone.
I know
And
what
then
you're
you
saying.
multiply that by years, like, which, most women that are dating, let's say in their mid-20s, they've been dealing with 10 approaches a day, 7 days a week for the last 6 or 7 years. Like, it gets incredibly repetitive and incredibly boring and annoying more than anything else. So what the mystery method does is it helps bypass that defense mechanism, which is probably the biggest thing. So the way that you bypass that defense mechanism is you go through a series of disqualifications. So the series of disqualifications are things like opinion openers. I'm not a threat. I'm asking you a question. I'm asking for your opinion on something. Or a disqualification can be a neg, which is what's often referred to as a negative compliment. So a negative compliment would be like, oh, your eyes absolutely look amazing today. Oh, sorry. Actually, it's the glare in my eye, or something stupid like that.
I know what a neg is. Yeah, neg is sarcasm a bit too, right?
It can be sarcasm,
But
for the most part, it's essentially a way of disqualifying yourself as a potential candidate. So the thing is with most people, if I try to gain your approval, I gain your approval by either kissing your ass, or I gain your approval by, trying to agree with you with a certain element. And women intuitively, whether they're consciously aware of it or not, have built-in defense mechanisms against this, because we're social creatures. And you have to keep in mind that society itself has only been around for about 10,000 years, 12,000 years.
Okay.
So prior to that, we lived in caveman societies. And what happened in those 50-person societies that were hunters and gatherers that moved around? Well, the women in particular were incredibly vulnerable because, we didn't live very long. We probably lived into our 30s at most. And we had to pair up with a mate that not only could help us breed, but it also could help provide food and help protect us against, elements. And because human beings are social creatures, we've developed mechanisms. Men have developed the ability to lie in order to get, sex and attention. And women, as a counteract of that, have also realized that men do lie. So they've counteracted that with what we call shit tests, or ability of testing a man's resolve. So how often have you heard a woman say, oh, like, this guy was hitting on me and I told him to leave me alone and he just walked away, and I kind of wanted him to keep pursuing me. Like we all hear this and we're like, what the hell's wrong with you? Well, what's wrong with it is that she was shit testing him. Now, does that mean that she's a good person? Does it mean that, she doesn't have some self-development to do? No, she definitely has some self-development to do because we lived in a civilized society now. But the elements of these subconscious reactions, such as, how to interact with someone the first time you're meeting them, like most men don't realize, a first impression can be incredibly scary for a woman. Like all you have to do is talk to a woman and say, tell me about the last time you were scared. And most people will think, oh, maybe like a couple of years ago. And most of them will say, I get scared every day walking to my car in a dark lit parking lot. Like people don't realize the amount of fear that women have to walk around with each and every day. Like I'm not saying that they're, isolated and paralyzed by it, but there's some elements of, danger out there that exist that women have to look out for. And in looking out for those dynamics, they weed out what they consider weak men. And part of the dynamics of the Venusian arts is teaching men, look, you don't necessarily have to be the most confident person in the room. You don't have to be the most muscular either. But what you do have to be is you have to be consistent. And that's what women really look for. Like if I had to summarize pickup in a nutshell, it's consistency. How likely are you going to be there for her when she needs you?
I'm sorry. Let me just interject.
Yeah.
Consistent in specifically what way?
Consistent in the element of, how they carry themselves. Am I a successful person? Am I a confident person? Am I consistently confident? Am I consistently empathetic? Am I consistently caregiving? Am I consistently protective? All these elements build what we call character. But women look for this more than men. This is why when it comes to men, we tend to be all about the physical aspects of things, such as being able to, look at a girl and say, oh, she has a nice butt, or she has a nice chest. Women don't look for that right away. Like, don't get me wrong, women are still attracted to the physique of a man. But what they look for more consistently is they look for that emotional stability. And that's what a lot of men, especially when they've grown up in single-parent households without that dominant, protective male in the group, like there's a big knowledge gap there. And that's what the Venusian arts, at least to me anyways, provided me information on.
Okay, so I just want to say hello to some of the people in the live stream. Flocks 94110, what's up? How you doing, bud? Chuckster, always a pleasure. Azam, good to see you from Saudi Arabia on deck. MX, hello. Please feel free to put any questions that you have for Clutch about PUA Tactics or PUA Lifestyle in the live stream, and we'll get to them at some point. What I want to ask now is the topic question, which would be pickup artist tactics and how they relate to today's dating scene. So you were in the pickup community, you said in your early 20s, so dare I say 12 years ago, 13 years ago, something like that?
About 15 years ago.
Okay.
So think of 2005 to
so much has changed in the dating scene, right? I mean, we're especially with dating apps, and I mean, we can even go to the extreme of the last year or two not being able to have the ability to be in bars and clubs, and then having a friend of mine was actually just in Vegas, and I think this was a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, and he was like, man, we all have to wear masks all the time. He's like, you can't even see someone's full face. And then you got to pull your mask down to talk to a girl or something like that. So, I mean, it's changed so much. I wanted to ask you, obviously, I think that there's some value in what you learned for meeting we're gonna circle back to this topic because you don't consider yourself a part of this community anymore, correct?
No, I haven't been a part of this community for
and
probably a good 12 years now.
So how would some of these tactics or strategies or formulas, as you said, that you learned, be helpful or useful to someone that's dating on, using the dating apps right now? Because I think that there's people that either hate or love dating apps based on their results. But I don't know if there's a lot of alternatives to dating apps right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Dating apps, what people don't realize is that the social dynamics are the same. The only difference is instead of being in front of the girl, let's say in a shopping mall or at a bar, you're now talking with her on a screen. The big difference is that not only is she talking to you behind the screen, she's probably talking to another, 20 matches that she's gotten that day. So that's the opposite extreme. Like back in the day, if a woman was at a club or a bar, it would be a very small percentage of men that would actually approach her, especially large groups of women that happen to be together. Because we as men, we have a built-in defense mechanism of our own that we call approach anxiety. This is why the 3-second rule exists in pickup. Because if I see a beautiful woman and I don't approach her within 3 seconds, what's going to happen is I'm just going to flake myself out. I'm going to scare myself from approaching, and I'm never going to do it. So there's a dynamic of, look, that's been replaced from men being afraid to approach women to, the entire bar now approaching women, because it's very easy to hide behind a screen. But there's also some other elements as well. And the other elements is that the dynamics that we talk about in pickups, such as disqualifying yourself, being funny, being witty, being comfortable to be around, still apply. So I remember that we talked about my dating profile, how my dating profile is one giant PowerPoint presentation. The reason for that is it's partially a peacock. It's something to stand out. It's something that catches the eye. But along with that, that in itself is not going to attract a woman to my profile. What's going to attract a woman and keep a woman in my profile is my wit, it's my charm, it's my ability to play along, it's my ability to, deal with her rebuttals, to essentially deal with her shit test, because a woman is dealing with all this attention on the dating apps. That's the opposite extreme. So it's very easy for a random guy to get lost in a wave or a field of, constant attention. And that's the dynamic that men have to deal with right now. So the best dynamic is to A, stand out, but to B, to also be able to carry a meaningful conversation. How many men, especially on a dating app, will be an opening line that says, "Oh, you're so beautiful," like,
or "Hey, how are you?"
Or "Hey, how are you?"
So what do you suggest? That was going to be my next question to you is, okay, so you get a match, someone likes you, you like them, and what would be an opening? Because what stands out to me is when you talk to them, a lot of times it's going to be through text, so there's no tone. I mean, so if that's the case, what's a good opening line for someone that's been liked and you like each other and you're going to talk? What would you open with?
There is no one opening line that works in every situation.
Okay.
However, with that said, what I've become incredibly good at is I've been incredibly good at looking for things in people's profiles that stand out. So an example, if a girl puts a picture of her canoeing somewhere, I could easily disqualify myself by saying, "It's fucking, oh, I just saw your pic of you in the canoe. That's fucking awesome. Too bad I can't swim." And you put a nice little smirk at the end. Emojis are absolutely essential in communicating emotions via text. You have to be fluent in emojis. As much as I hate emojis, emojis make or break a conversation. And that's the new language that we're dealing with right now, especially with these interactions being so essentially artificial, because 99% of the people we interact with now is behind a phone screen or behind a computer screen. The element is that what makes you stand out is A, your ability to carry a conversation, but B, the ability to be witty, especially if you're dealing with a woman that's getting a lot of attention. The best thing you can do is take a picture or conversation or scenario, even something she says in her profile. You'd be surprised the number of women that say lemon, so I know that you're actually reading this, in their profile. I personally won't say lemon. Instead, what I will say is, you know what I love? I love lemon juice. Or I'll be very indirect about it. So she's left wondering whether or not I've actually read her profile or not. The element of mystery, no pun intended, is that when a person's uncertain of what you're actually thinking, it's kind of attractive and it's kind of mysterious. You kind of want to know what the end result is.
Sure.
But the other aspect is that, look, the problem that most men deal with dating apps is that they think that the woman is on there because she's looking for Prince Charming. She ain't. Most of the time, she's on there because she's bored. Like, talk to any woman that's been on a dating app. Most of them have their interactions on the toilet. It doesn't mean that you can't build something from that. It doesn't mean that you can't, walk away with the phone number. And by the way, one of my dynamics is you absolutely have to get the phone number from the girl quickly. You need to get that conversation off the app, because if she's an attractive girl, she's being bombarded with 30 to 40 messages every hour. So it's very easy for people to get lost.
So the next step, once you get the number, is immediately call for you?
No. Don't immediately call. Just when you get the phone number and you get them off, you get them off the app in the sense of you start a conversation fresh in a new platform on your terms, which is, the phone number close. But the other element of phone number close is like text game is actually a really hard thing to perfect, because you have to be witty, charming, funny, but you also can't be too aggressive. So one mistake I usually found people that were starting off usually did is that they would often come off as too aggressive on texts, or they would carry a conversation on too long. One of the best things that you can do is have the ability to walk away from a conversation and re-engage it on a later date. It's just sometimes when you have nothing to talk about, look, it's better to say nothing than it is to bore someone to death. Because once you have them bored and once they have you in that mindset of you being a boring person, like, it's really, really hard to recover from that.
The thing is with dating apps and texting, you have a shorter window to impress or not impress. What I would say, circling back to where we started this conversation, where you said a highly attractive woman, how often do you think they get approached or hit on? And I said it's really hard to gauge that right now because of what's going on in the world and how dating apps. But I would say that a lot of people say, and I do believe, that an attractive woman on a dating app gets a lot of action, and there's a lot. So that would actually be true, where some people are questioning that they get hit on 70 or 80 times at a bar or a restaurant, and let's just say back in the day. When that was more prevalent, because right now that's not happening as much. But I would say dating app wise, if someone looks extremely attractive in their picture, or provocative or seductive or sexual, and they get a lot of attention, they could easily probably get 80 or 100 views a day, or likes. And I've actually heard guys complain about that they're not getting as many likes. So, the thing is, do you believe that what you learned from your PUA days transfers over into dating apps?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to the ability to be funny and witty. Like, one of the most attractive things a man can do for a woman is to be funny. Why? Because he has to be really comfortable in his shoes to be funny. Like,
okay.
the problem with humor is that if you're not confident in your delivery, like, even an ounce of desperation or an ounce of doubt comes out really easily in the joke. Like, and don't get me wrong,
true.
You jump on my Discord, dude. I make so many dad jokes, I fall flat on my face like consistently, but I own it. Like, if I say a terrible joke, I'm just like, you know what, that was terrible. I'm standing by it. I don't give two shits. But that's the element of being confident in one's delivery. It's like, you can't be afraid of that failure. And that's where a lot of men really struggle, because, we've all been to a stand-up comedy, or at least most of us have been to a stand-up comedy club where a comic bombs. And why do they bomb? They bomb because they're looking for that reinforcement. They're looking for that assurance. Like, a true person knows they're funny. A true woman knows she's attractive. Same thing goes for a man.
Is it more difficult to be funny through text?
Depends on the context and depends on who you're dealing with. Like, the problem is that what I find is that people aren't fluent in emoji talk. Like, emojis go a big way, or go a long way in communicating tone and in communicating intent behind a text. Like, innuendos especially, because, like, part of the dynamic of hitting on an attractive woman, or at least a woman that's used to being hit on, is not just hitting on her, because she gets a message, like 3 or 4 messages a day telling her she's beautiful. She knows she's beautiful. The element is being indirect about it, saying, instead of commenting on how good she looks, be like, oh, the lighting on this picture is absolutely amazing. Oh, and you look okay, by the way. Like, it's a small little undertone. And these undertones build a lot of character, because she's never going to get a direct answer from you. And part of that mystery, guess what, is attractive. Because what does that say to her? That says to her, you're disqualifying yourself. Why is he disqualifying himself? Because he has options. And a man with options is attractive.
Exactly. That I agree with 100%. What would you say that in your pickup artist days, or even maybe now, if you want to divulge that, what would you say is your go-to openers?
Opinion openers are a big one. Like, people love talking about themselves. So it's gotten to the point where it's somewhat natural to me. So if I'm approaching a woman for the first time, like, my immediate reaction to her is I gauge the room, or at least I was when we would go out. But you gauge the room, and you deal with which people are going to give me problems, which people seem friendly, which people are going to be critical of my views, which people are going to reinforce me. The element is that when you're dealing with people in a public chat room, let's say like the Discord, you constantly deal with people coming in and out. Part of the element is making everyone seem welcome. The hard part, and this was true when we would go to the bars as well, if you were interested in a girl, you wouldn't give her attention right away. So part of the element is, let's say, you approach a woman, and if she was a social person, which you assume she was if she's at the club, she was there with 10 friends. My immediate reaction would be, if I was interested in one person, is I would greet every single person, and I would greet my target, as we called it, last. And I would give her the least amount of effort, the least amount of energy out of the whole group. Because as far as I'm concerned, that initial interaction is not about her. That initial interaction is about winning over the group. Because the best thing that you can do whenever you're approaching a group of strangers is to get them all to like you. Because the moment that you start ignoring that one person that you're interested in, let's say, you get interacting with them, you might get them laughing or exchange stories. And after about 10 to 15 minutes, this person has felt really awkward in the corner because you haven't been paying attention to them. And if you're good in your social dynamics, you keep the conversation going. You look over and say, I'm sorry, guys, I've been completely rude. Hello there. What's your name? Do you guys mind if I take her away for a bit just to get to know her a little bit better? And by then, if you've done your job well, it shouldn't be a problem, because they all like you. They figure, okay, this guy's just being nice because he has been ignoring her for the last 10 minutes. But the other dynamic is that with dating apps, you don't have those kind of group dynamics anymore. On places like Discord, you do. But with dating apps, what makes you different is the ability to disqualify yourself. So it's not to say that I'm not interested in the woman when I message her the first time, or the second time, or the third time. It's to portray that aspect that I have options without directly saying I have options.
So how do you do that on a dating app?
Not giving a shit of what she thinks. I know it's kind of far-fetched, but if I'm in a joking mood, and like me, my personal sense of humor, ask anyone in my Discord, I have a very sexually energized sense of humor. That's just what I grew up around. So I will make sexual innuendo jokes. I will make big dick jokes and like the most innocent comments. And one of the things that usually gets called out is like, oh, you're so into sexual jokes. And be like, yeah, that's just who I am. Like, I don't let it affect my frame. I don't let it affect my character. Does that mean I'm going to attract every single woman that I approach with this technique? Probably not. But what it will mean is that the women that I do attract, the women that do feel enticed to getting to know me better, know that my frame is a confident one, that I'm consistent. That's the element of being able to maintain posture, maintain frame. Like, that's what's going to differentiate you from everyone else on the dating app. It's the ability to say, this is who I am, and I don't apologize for it. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, there are plenty of fish in the sea. And this is the number one issue that I found that people ran into, especially when they first got into pickup, because most of the time they got into pickup to pick up that one girl versus going out and, seeing what's out there and getting to interact with people. Like I entered pickup after a really toxic relationship in my late teens. And I basically just said, look, I'm entering this dynamic with the idea of I just want to get to know people. I just want to understand the opposite sex much better. And if there's anything that comes out of it, that will just be a bonus. And that's the mentality you should have in dating apps. It's not about picking up that one girl. It's not about finding the one. It's about having a series of experiences, and if it leads to something, great. Let's lead with it. But don't become obsessed for it. And most specifically, don't be so attached to the outcome so early on. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be attached to an outcome when you're with someone for 2 months, 3 months, a year. But so early on, like what people usually do is they just get way too attached way too quickly. And that's a weak statement to be in, or it's a weak mindset.
What do you, how do you think there's been some negative effects of being in the pickup artist community or using these techniques once you kind of meet your match as a woman and hang up your pickup artist uniform and you're peacocking and these kinds of things and you go, I found a really good one. Do you feel like there's a different set of skills to keep a good woman?
One thing that I catch myself doing a lot is I catch myself reading the social dynamics of situations. So you've heard the statement that 80% of communication is nonverbal, right? Mm-hmm. So people will often say something and mean something else. Sure. I'll give you an example. Last year at my job, I had a big talk with my boss because COVID was happening. We were having massive reduction at work. And I put him on speakerphone so my girlfriend could hear. And I was talking with him. I'm like, I just want to know what the situation of the company is. I'm getting some estimates on like what the long-term expectations are and what the numbers are expected to be. And the whole conversation, my boss was like, oh, you have nothing to worry about. Things are perfectly fine, yada, yada. I hang up the phone and I looked to my girlfriend. I said, I have 3 months before they terminate my contract. And she's like, wait, how did you get that from that? According to him, he was just being reinforced. I'm like, I know him well enough to know the social cues to look for. And my estimate is I have about 3 months. And I was dead accurate of when my contract was terminated. That's something I catch myself doing a fair bit because I'm very good at reading social situations, especially when you get to know people, you get to know their mannerisms, you get to know their tones, you get to know their body language when you're there in person. And I do catch myself doing that more than I should be doing for a healthy dynamic. Because if someone tells me I'm going to the store and they tell me in the wrong way, I know automatically that they're in a bad mood. And that's not something that isn't inherently bad, but it can be very easy to overanalyze the smallest things when you know how to read them properly.
So, but how does that relate to, because you've had multiple girlfriends. I won't say how many because I'm not sure how many that you've broken up with. And you've had ones that were good women, that were good catches that you wanted to stay with. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
And did you feel like the pickup artist tactic, strategy, or formulas didn't apply once you were in a long-term relationship with a woman as much?
I would say that depending on the type of woman I was dealing with, like the current girlfriend I'm with right now, is a securely attached person. So with her, it's not so many games. There are some games here and there. Like it's only natural to get jealous, for example. But for the most part, I don't have to deal with these shit tests, as we call them. Versus someone who was like a dismissive, like my ex from LA last year, dismissive avoidant. I would have to deal with the shit test probably 2 to 3 times a day with that one. So the element there is, look, the idea and the philosophy that I followed in pickup, and this is part of the reason why I left pickup in the end, is that my idea was always I was going to leave a person better off than how I found them, no matter what my intent was, whether my intent was to sleep with them, enter a relationship with them, or just make a friend. My goal was always and consistently to leave people better off than how I had found them. Okay. And I always thought that was a good philosophy to follow.
Sure.
what I started to notice, especially in Ottawa as the community started growing, is that you took a bunch of guys who were socially awkward, taught them the dynamics of how to pick up women, and they started picking up women really successfully. But we also saw a transition where, like, I remember meeting guys who were like computer scientists and who were incredibly humble and incredibly proud and incredibly nice, turn into douchebags overnight, because you can't give an average citizen kryptonite in the world of Superman and expect them to like not abuse it. Like it's an element. It's not saying like you've become Neo and you can now see the Matrix, but you give someone a skill set and don't give them a sense of responsibility with that skill set, especially when you're dealing with, constantly circulating numbers. Eventually they will become so entitled and so self-absorbed that it won't matter anymore, and they will cease to be the person they were at the beginning of the journey. And that's what I noticed with pickup. I noticed that people that entered it with the best of intentions, and not all these people were bad, but when you enter that philosophy where you start ranking women by a number, and you start ranking your value by the number of closes you've had in a week, and all you ever talk about is, I got this number, I got that number, I got these digits, that's this. I had an F close last night. Great, and you high five your buddies. Your entire life and soul becomes absorbed over the satisfaction and the gratification given to you by other people. That's not sustainable. And eventually you hit, in my case, I hit a quarter life crisis, because I realized that the entire persona I had put together and all my friends that I had surrounded myself with, I had nothing in common with them other than the fact that we liked to sleep with women. That's all we ever had in common.
But
so, yeah.
I've always go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't let you finish. Go ahead.
No, that's basically summarizing. Like, it's a big realization when you realize all your friends, the only thing you have in common is the fact that you love to sleep with women.
I mean, I had a college roommate that you would call, like you said, as a natural. He would never call himself a pickup artist, but he was just, women just flocked to him, and he was really good with them. I guess he had a lot of confidence, you could say, and he was proud of it. But he also, he had some reason to be confident too, because he was 6'3". Women found him naturally attractive. They would come to him. He would certainly use some of these techniques, like you said, about, some of these things you mentioned, I know about too, not giving too much attention or nags, things like that. I like the idea that you use the word consistent. I've never thought of that before in that term. Being consistent to who you are is what you're saying. In other words, if you're going to make a joke, you stick to it. If you're the sarcastic one at the table and someone doesn't like your joke, you don't mind. I get that, but going back to now, and how much dynamics have changed. Would you even say that people consider themselves pickup artists still? Is there still a big community?
There is a very big community. And I heard I did read one of the comments kind of brush on this, although I don't think they were directly aware of how they made the connection. There's definitely a brush off between pickup and what is modern day red pill and black pill. So what ended up happening, and just to give you a little history lesson of what happened in the industry, after Strauss made his book or wrote his book, the community got an excessive amount of attention,
right?
More so than before. And the result of that is that you had these competing bodies, because a lot of these pickup guys, and I never did this full time, although I knew people that did this full time. A lot of guys would make their paycheck by essentially teaching a bunch of dorks how to pick up women at a bar. Like, we would do sarges, as we called them, where groups of like 20 guys would go to bars and we'd approach 20 women. At the end of the day, we would have a debrief and like exchange notes and say, this is where I went wrong, or this is where you fucked up. and we'd have other people watching saying your body language is off, you're pecking too early, you're jumping into too many of her hoops this early. Like it was down to a science. It was that specific. But what ended up happening was after Strauss released his book, you had all this attention in all the media, and people knew the mainstream routines. So you couldn't do a best friend opener anymore. You couldn't do certain opinion openers anymore.
I heard about this. I heard that women would, especially in places like LA, because I would say that you'd have to agree that pickup artistry communities would have to be in major cities. It wouldn't be in Oklahoma farm towns, right? So there's certain environments that were better than others, especially specifically being in cities, right? And specifically being in you know, clubs or bars or things like that is probably the best hunting grounds. But do you believe that there was a point where some of you would just get burned out?
Pickup artists would usually go through a series of depression, because the problem with a lot of these guys,
Interesting,
especially people that grew up in single person households or single mother households 90% of the time, I would say, is that usually they came from really, really religious families. So like one of the things that I had to deal with, especially, I still have a very strong moral compass. But back when I was a teenager, I had such a strong moral compass in the sense of I didn't believe in, well, I still don't, but like things like cheating, for example, were like absolutely atrocious to me. I'm like, how could people do this? Like, this is absolutely insane that someone would betray a best friend like this, or, you know, the things like theft, for example, or playing with people, like playing with their hearts. Like I couldn't comprehend, why is it that women out there play with other people's hearts and they do it in a malicious way? And, you know, that was a really hard moral compass for me to come to a conclusion with, because growing up in a household full of women, I was always taught, just be yourself. Sure, you can be yourself and pick someone up if yourself is consistently confident. But if I lack confidence and I'm just being myself, if I'm being a pushover, that's not going to help me. And that was probably the biggest pill to swallow, because I grew up with this idea that as long as I was a good person, people would like me. And that's something that, that's something that pickup really made me question, because all of a sudden with the routines, it wasn't about, you know, just who I was as a person. It's what I represented. And what I represented was someone who was confident, ambitious, who knew themselves. Like, there's an expression in pickup, fake it till you make it. The idea of you can't build success without, you know, assuming that you're successful. And it's a good mentality. It's kind of spread into other subcultures like law of attraction, for example. It's not a bad thing to have, but there's limitations to it. And the limitations to it are, you can't constantly go out and sarge night after night after night after night, constantly looking to pick up women and expect it to be a stable equation. Like, part of the stability of being in a relationship, or even, you know, having sex, is the ability to be with someone that you can rely on and be consistent. Like that's the element. So what happens with a lot of these guys, at least when I was in the pickup community, is that this pickup routine was very good at picking up women who were incredibly attractive and incredibly dismissive. But the problem with dismissive women is that attention span doesn't last very long. So yeah, you could, you know, date that hottie for a couple of weeks, and then you guys fight for whatever reason, and then you're left single alone. Well, what's the solution to it? Well, according to the pickup artist, the solution to get past this one-itis, as we called it, was to sleep with 10 women. Okay, well, you got to get back on that horse, and you got to start picking up another woman, another woman, another woman, another woman.
Was there a particular type of woman that, character-wise or personality-wise, and again, it seems to me that you are targeting only the hottest women, because this is kind of a competitive atmosphere and ego-based, which I don't mean, you know, when you're in your early mid-20s, is what it is. But was there a particular type of woman where you went, oh, wow, that's a woman, she's attractive, but my pickup artist stuff won't work?
Pickup, the routines doesn't guarantee success.
Ah.
This isn't
this is a numbers game. Like, let's put our cards on the table. Just because I'm a confident guy, hell, just because I'm a physically attractive guy, doesn't mean that every single woman on this live stream is going to find me attractive.
Yep.
There might be like, 3 or 4 to find me attractive, and kudos to them for having good taste. But the element is that, look, this is a numbers game. There are going to be days I crash and burn. There are going to be days I go out and I Sarge the hell out of myself, and I'm going to suck, and nothing's going to pull me out of it. That's part of the reality.
So it's like sales.
This is where, sorry?
It's similar to sales.
Very similar to sales. In fact, it's essentially you selling a product. What's the product? The product is you. How can I sell myself? But the problem is, it's like spin selling. You can't go in and say, I want to sell you this product, being, my charismatic self, like talk about an ego. So instead, what you do is you go in and you disqualify yourself. Oh, you don't want to be with me anyways. Like, one of the best openers I've ever used is, too bad you're not my type. Like, say that to a girl who's used to getting, like, tons of attention. Like, the immediate reaction is like, wait, why not?
I know.
And before she can catch herself and say, wait, why do I care? It's an emotional reaction.
Well,
to say, wait, why am I not good?
It's also an open loop psychologically, because they're like, "What? Why would you think that? I've never gotten that before." So
Yeah,
it opens a loop in their head. I know exactly what you mean. So
Yeah.
So moving forward to now that you don't consider yourself a pickup artist and you've kind of distanced yourself from that lifestyle, what would you say is your approach now? Are you looking for a girlfriend generally because you just prefer that overall, a long-term relationship? So is your approach different with women, or do you still take over some of these things that you've learned when you're pursuing? Because right now I would say that if you let go of pickup artistry, then you're looking for long-term relationships?
Well, there's a couple of cognitive dissonance dynamics in my brain right now. Because,
Sure.
like, one of the things I've told people on my channel is I don't want to have children. And the reason I don't want to have children is I've grown up in a household that is highly sociopathic, and psychopathy is incredibly genetically derived. So part of my concern is I don't want to have children that are psychopaths. I rather adopt. Like, that's just my dynamic.
Psychopath.
But the other dynamic as well is that if you're asking me what I'm looking for in a relationship, look, I'm looking for security, just like everyone else. Like, we're social creatures. We want to find people that we can be secure with. Like, and different people with different upbringings will have different definitions of security. But what I look for is I look for someone who will support me as much as I support them. And that's something that I've definitely had to struggle with, because the thing with certain types of women, not to overgeneralize ladies on the live stream, the issue with certain types of women is that level of beauty also comes a high level of entitlement. And security, it doesn't come from just being beautiful. Security comes from the ability to emotionally support, financially support the aspect of another human being. It's not saying that, I constantly need you to be there. Like, part of the element of being a human being is to hopefully be in a productive and sustainable lifestyle, whether that lifestyle includes work, physical activity, being positive to your fellow human being. But there's always going to be that speed bump that we all hit. Like, hell, we're hitting a societal level speed bump right now with the pandemic. Part of the dynamic of what I want to look for in a partner is I want to look for a partner that supports me when I need that support, and vice versa. That's what I look for in a relationship. The problem is that these techniques that I've learned, for the most part, attract the wrong kind of person. So I have to be incredibly filtering when it comes to the people I match with on Tinder. And, unlike most men, whenever I am on a dating app, you match with an attractive woman, you immediately think, oh, I want to get to know her better, regardless of whether you see some red flags or not. I've had to force myself to unmatch with people I find incredibly attractive, knowing fully well this person's going to end badly. That's probably my biggest struggle.
That's life experience. That's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
A closing question I would have is, not getting into numbers or lay counts, as some people call them, or some people call it body count. You know, how many people you've been with. And I always think that that's kind of a dark term. But not going directly there, but being that you've conquered a few mountains here,
Sure.
looking back, how much value is in that? Do you know what I mean by that is that, and this isn't a negative thing, this is a genuine question. How much value is in that? Let's say I don't know how many women you slept with, but you slept with 100. Like, how many do you even remember?
I remember all of them.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a person with memories. Like, memories have a very deep impact in myself. I remember a lot of detail when it comes to that.
I've always made the joke that males love to be able to, not so much now at my age. God, there's this little gnat fly. That they would love to have like a taxidermy room where they had women, like a wax museum, and they go, yeah, 85, I took her down. Yeah, 86, that was Rhonda. She was great.
You want to know the big secret of why most men don't remember the women they sleep with?
What is that? Alcohol?
Because most of the flings are done when they're drunk. That's one thing.
Alcohol. I just said alcohol. Yeah, alcohol.
Yeah. You called it. One of the things that we constantly reinforce in pickup is you have to learn how to pick up sober. You can't use liquid confidence for that, because the moment you use the bottle to approach a woman, A, you're being inauthentic to yourself, but B, you're learning a deep level of dependency on an external substance.
That's interesting.
Like that. That's so dangerous. Like, so I purposely, for 2 years, I was going clubbing. I purposely would go to the bar sober. In fact, I wouldn't drink a dime, or I wouldn't drink a drop of alcohol for that reason.
Wow.
And it was good. It was good because it taught me, how to deal with people that were drunk. Like, there's nothing worse than dealing with a bunch of woo girls that have had, been drinking for the last 6 hours. But the other element is that it also taught me how to deal with, male dynamics. You get a bunch of drinks into a bunch of guys, and these guys have been talking to these girls all night, and all of a sudden you swoop in and you're taking away their prize. Men get aggressive.
Of course.
Get incredibly aggressive. So
well, of course.
You have to learn how to diffuse those situations, and not only diffuse the situations, but be witty about it. Because if a girl that's just met you tonight sees you getting into a fight with a random dude over, she's not going to want to talk to you. Like, it's never going to benefit anyone. What will benefit you is you being able to diffuse the situation in a confident and calm manner. In fact, you getting the other guys to like you is probably the biggest thing. Like, one of the best objectives anyone can do is to get the enemy to help them achieve the objective. We've always talked about this. I keep my friends close, but I keep my enemies even closer. It's very interesting to see how social dynamics helps people achieve objectives. Not saying that I view people as pawns, like on a chess piece, but it's always nice to be able to take this experience. And this experience expands out to just pickup. It expands into my corporate career, where I've used these techniques to move up the corporate ladder, and I continue to move up the corporate ladder because I know how to diffuse a very intense and a very intimidating situation. Like, it's not all bad. Like, there's a very negative light portrayed in the media that pickup artists are just these douchebags that want to sleep with women. Don't get me wrong, some of them are, and it doesn't take very much of a Google search to find out these kind of people and who they are. But there are also other people. Like Neil Strauss is, I don't agree with everything the guy did, but you can just tell from the way he writes things. He legitimately cares about personal development. He legitimately cares about teaching people a new skill set. Like, they're not all bad people.
Kevin just wrote, this guy just talked about how sociopath runs in his family. Now he's talking about how he's basically a master manipulator, covert narcissist, perhaps.
I mean, that's a good point. And to answer that question, Kevin, me understanding the social dynamics of a social situation versus me actually, manipulating a situation to, let's say, cause a couple to break up, which I've seen other people in the community do, is one aspect. The other aspect is I've had a very deep
psychological reflection in my later years on how I used to act, and the company I kept around. And the company I kept around, some of them were sociopathic in many senses. But the other element is that I was also, in my view back then, a boy who lacked a strong male presence. And what I was looking for reinforcement in how to interact with the opposite sex, which is not something I was ever taught. So I don't view myself as sociopathic per se. But even asking that question, and that's a question I've asked myself, kind of reinforces that I'm not a sociopath. Because if I was a sociopath, I wouldn't be having these debates with you. I wouldn't even consider the idea of it. Mm-hmm. But I understand definitely where he's coming from. There's a lot of misconstruations in what action and consequence are. Like, I can enter a situation and manipulate a situation. It doesn't mean it has malintent, which I think is usually what people confuse. They confuse malintent with manipulation.
We'll close it out with, what's one of your craziest stories during your pickup artist days? Is there a story that you remember with a stage 5 clinger, or someone that was showing up at your house, or that you couldn't?
You see,
go ahead.
Like, I'm so far past those types of stories. Like, I definitely have them. It's just that, look, the one thing I will say about pickup is this: through all the crazy stories, even like the crazy women, and there've definitely been crazy women out there. With all the interactions I've had, with the women I've slept with, the people I've met, even the bad nights, I have no regrets for the experience. Okay. Because the experience taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about myself. Like, I talked about my family being sociopathic. That happened after I got out of the pickup community, and after I put some time and space between me and my family, and I realized this is not the right way to think. And I wouldn't have had that breakthrough had I not gone through this experience. But the other aspect as well is that, look, I've had some funny stories. Like, there was one time.
Here we
this
go.
is a story I don't mind telling.
Thank you.
There was one time where I ended up drinking a bottle of wine just one night randomly on Skype, and I ended up reconnecting with one of my exes from university. And somehow I finished that bottle of wine, and I woke up on a bus to Quebec City, which is like an 8-hour drive from Ottawa, Canada. I have no recollection how I got there, but apparently when I got there, my ex was waiting for me, and we had a really nice weekend together. But it was just one of those dynamics that I had no idea how I got there or the situation behind it. But it was definitely one of those funny memories where I kind of look back and chuckle and be like, you know what? With the skill sets I have, that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So, you kind of just laugh at it and be able to move on from it.
Well, Clutch, I want to thank you for taking the time today and divulging so much about your pickup artist days and how it's affected you and how it's helped you, actually, because I think that what you're sharing is in retrospect. And I actually agree with you. I think that just like there's different cultures, I think that, pickup communities or, people that are skaters or surfers, or like, everyone has subcultures, right? And so when you said you were in a community, you had a subculture with social dynamics is the word you use, and how you get credit within that group or recognition, and you were a part of a group, just like someone could be a part of a gang, right, in an inner city. But I think that the fact that you've been able to strain out some good things from it, and then strain away the bad stuff, the stuff that you were like, you know what, actually, I kind of grew out of it. I don't look at, after reading Neil Strauss's book, The Game, which I read years ago, so I don't know it verbatim, but I didn't look at it as a completely negative thing, because I felt like a lot of guys that get into it have been neglected in that part of their life, or felt neglected in that part of life, and they want to get better. So they've been bad with women for so long, and that was Neil Strauss's case. I think the beginning of the book, he basically went on tour with a famous rock band. I don't know who it was, but he was
Motley Crue.
Okay, I had AC/DC in my head, but okay, yeah. So I mean, I'm not a Motley Crue fan, but everyone knows who they are. And he was basically backstage and different things like that, and he couldn't even get any kind of action. And if you saw his before picture to his after picture, one thing that kind of helped him was the fact that he wrote for Rolling Stone. That's pretty cool. But I felt like a lot of people that got into it, and by the way, let me just say this: people that I've known that have been extremely successful with real estate or stocks or building a business, a lot of them when they were young, they were poor. So a lot of people are what I call it is you have an empty bucket, right? Like you have these buckets in your life, and you have religion, you have security, you have finances, you have romance, you have all these different things. And sometimes you fill the bucket with water and you feel fulfilled. You feel like you have enough. But sometimes some of those buckets have holes in them. And so the water just keeps dripping out. And if you felt like when you were, let's say in your teens or your early 20s, like I just couldn't get women, it's like if you figure out the secret sauce or you figure out a way to go about it, you're going to be making up for lost time, and it's going to be fun. And I think that you're also going to feel like your bucket has a hole in it. Like I'm not fulfilled yet. And I feel like that's okay. But realize at some point, when is it going to get to the point where you're happy with this? Because it sounds like, from what you just said, there was an expiration date on Pickup Artist, right?
There's definitely an expiration date. Like the element is that, look, and if we want to compare it to modern day standards, like the incel community right now, that comes from a portion of men in society who have not been taught, or at the very least have not been put in positions where they can absorb this kind of information, to the point where they resent an entire sex and essentially project negative internal hate and disgust towards women. And there's something to be said about where that comes from. Part of that comes from the creation of this subculture where, talking about sex in public is frowned upon. I'm not saying that you need to go and, talk to a random stranger about sex, but sex is a part of life. It's a part of community. Like the reason that we get into relationships is sex, replication, and survival. So let's not make it an elephant in the room. Let's not make it a taboo to talk about what our objectives are here. Does it mean that, you need to sleep with every single attractive woman that comes and crosses your path, or vice versa, every sexy man that crosses your path? No, it doesn't mean that at all. But what it does mean is that this is a skill set that certain individuals lacked growing up. Like, I think about myself growing up. I would play video games in my room with a closed door. Like I didn't like the family dynamics I grew up in. And that caused a lot of internal resentment and a lot of internal hate. What this allowed me to do is it allowed me to take a skill that I was severely lacking, and it taught me a formula that worked. Now, does that formula hold true today or hold true to my standards today? No. I don't have the same values or standards I had when I was, 24. But what I do have is I have an incredible ambitious drive that wouldn't exist had I not learned that skill set.
What do you mean by that? Give an example of that.
Well, I mean, me moving up the corporate ladder. Part of the ability to be confident in one's shoes, be confident in oneself, is to show results. If I have, let's say, entered my 20s as a virgin, which wasn't the case for me, but it was the case for certain people. I've met people as late as 30 or even like 35 who are virgins.
Jesus.
There's a strong sense of insecurity that comes from that. Like,
sure.
Imagine being 35 and never being with a woman. Like, that sense of insecurity is absolutely huge. How is someone who cannot be confident with the opposite sex going to be confident in a corporate setting? How am I going to be comfortable in my own shoes? How am I going to be confident in my abilities if I can't do the very basic thing that I'm supposed to do on this planet, which is survive and replicate? So
the element of what this industry taught me was it taught me how to be successful. And most importantly, it taught me how to deal with failure, because the majority of people that you approach, regardless of who they are, you're not going to maintain a proper connection with them. This goes true to any relationship, sexual, platonic, or otherwise. The majority of people that you meet on a day-to-day basis will not stay in your life.
Right.
The element is not to force them to stay. The element is to gain the experience. And this is why we say it's a numbers game, because it's not a numbers game in the sense of I'm going to approach 10 women and get 10 phone numbers and one of those is going to be my future wife. It's a numbers game in the sense that you approach a situation, you say, I'm not going to be attached to this outcome because I know intuitively, based on my past experience, that things are going to be okay regardless.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be respectful of your time because I know it's late over there in Chile. I don't know if I said that correctly. Chile. Am I saying it? Is it Chile?
It's Chile, but I'm really not that picky, dude.
Whenever you say like a foreign word and someone's like, "Oh God, you said it wrong. Your accent's wrong." It's like, okay, tell me how to say it. So, what time is it over there in Chile?
It's about 2:00 in the morning, but
Jeez.
I'm also getting used to Pacific time now. I'm making that transition. I'm seeing the chat. All these people are from Toronto. You guys are aware I grew up in Toronto, right? But just saying.
Well, Dark Knight, I think, is Montreal. Rob's outside of Toronto. I'm not sure the other people.
Montreal. You go for a good time.
Before we close this out, since he's still got some juice, does anyone have some closing questions? I got to get lunch pretty soon. But does anyone have any closing questions on the live stream? We've gone on and on and on and on here, and it's been good. It's been good.
Yeah. I've been called a sociopath. That means I've done my job well.
Four bad ones.
To answer your question, Rob, I grew up all over Toronto. So I grew up downtown by Ellen Road, and then of course, or not downtown, but you get the idea. My Ellen Road and the 401, and then I also grew up in Etobicoke and Scarborough area. So to answer your question,
but now you're Southern Cal bound, right? You're going to be in Southern California.
Yeah, I'm off to Orange County next week. So that's exactly right.
You're excited about that, right?
I am and I'm not. So like one of the downsides is when I came to Chile in February of last year, I came here with the expectation I was going to only be here like a month to visit friends and family and catch up with people. And COVID hit. And in the span of a year, I lost my job, had to do coaching in order to make ends meet. I'm really grateful for the people that reached out to me for coaching to help me make ends meet. I was able to survive because of my channel. So I really appreciate the people that reached out to me. But the other element is I reconnected with someone here who I had dated when I had visited a couple of years ago, and we became a couple. And, it's an amazing relationship. She's an amazing girl. But unfortunately, with me going back to California, we're heading in separate directions. So we're going to have to end this relationship. Mm-hmm. And, she's an incredibly amazing person. We're going to stay friends. I'm going to do my best to see her as often as I can and vice versa. But being in this industry, as I'm sure you're aware, Mac, distance kills people long term. So
yeah,
I know exactly what the process is.
You're doing the right approach. You're doing the right
so
approach.
It's better to end things on good terms than bad terms. So I'm sad to see this relationship end. At the same time, you guys have seen my level of confidence. You've seen firsthand what my experience brings. I'm fairly confident that both her and I are going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And this is where, people that approach this channel and mine really struggle with it. It's the ability to deal with loss and to deal with pain. Part of the loss and pain is to be appreciative that you've had that connection. Because think about it, guys. Most of you are here because you've been through a really toxic breakup. And it's not saying that I'm not empathetic for it. I am definitely empathetic for it. I've been in many toxic relationships. I know firsthand how painful it can be. But the fact that you shared that connection means something. Because remember what I said about those incels that I knew back in the day, the 35-year-old virgins, in some cases even older. Those are people that have never had that connection. They've never felt the touch of a woman in the bedroom.
Like it's a really deep and intimate thing, and nothing can prepare you to experience that experience. So you have to embrace it. You have to be appreciative it happened. But sometimes outside of your own control, things have to end. It doesn't mean the end of the world. It just means it's opening a door to a new experience.
Good attitude, good approach. And who knows down the road if you leave it on a good note. So you guys reconnected once before.
We've definitely talked about that possibility, but no promises, no pressure. I know the routine as well as you do, Mac.
Yeah. Well, I know it from talking to so many people in long distances that went wrong. We have one good question here from G Money, who's a legend in his own right. What does the sexual marketplace look like in the next 20 to 30 years? I'll answer it first, and then I'll let you answer it. Have you seen the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix? Have you seen that movie?
Are you asking me? Or are
you have you seen that movie?
Question? I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I know the premise of the movie.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be something to that. I think that I don't know if that's in the next 5 or 10 years, but you're saying 20 or 30 years. I think that there will be, I don't want to call that a robot. That would
AI.
Yeah, AI is the word. AI type person that someone can talk to. I think that will be in place. Not, like I said, I'm not saying in 5 years or 10 years. I don't know when. But that would be one of the things that's not around right now that could catch fire. Because so many people, and this is especially because of the pandemic in the last 2 years or year and a half, maybe year and a half, not even 2 years. God, it feels like it's been longer. Are just desperate to talk to someone. I've met a lot of people that are in breakups where they were texting or FaceTiming someone for over a year they never met. So what's the difference? At least with AI, you get to talk to them for forever. To me, there's a big difference. I'm just saying, keep in mind, we all judge, right? We all will go, oh, I would never do that, or I would never do that. I mean, some of these people are in certain situations at certain places in their lives where they are, I can't leave my job, but I hate the city I live in. I'm waiting for my pension. You know what I mean? There's circumstances that lead to circumstances. And so I'm just seeing a lot more people that are in online relationships where they don't even meet people. And they do intimate things on, like they'll tell me that they do things online, I guess undress and different things like that. And then you're already seeing, look at this OnlyFans thing. I mean, this is huge. This is huge right now. So I think the sexual marketplace is gonna change quite a bit, and I think that there's gonna be more breakups. I've said that before. I think people will have shorter relationships because they have less patience, and people move a little bit more often now, but they also change their values quicker because there's so much goddamn information online. Like, look at if you went and said, oh, where can I make a lot of money right now? And you went on YouTube, you'll get 1,000 different answers. Buy gold, don't buy stocks, buy this, that. So people get mixed up in what they really want. And so the sexual marketplace, I think it's going to be, and this is not wishful thinking. This isn't me going, oh, this is going to be great. Unless there's some kind of restriction, because again, I'm saying 20, 30 years in the next 20, 30 years. So I'm not looking at 5, 10 years. Unless there's some kind of change with how much people use social media, and some restrictions on the fact that every social media is progressively going in the direction, especially something like Instagram, where bigger, better, badder, the best looking people with the biggest cars and the most money get the most views, and everyone else chases that. And then if you don't have that, you kind of feel like a loser, I suppose. I think that this is going to bleed over into the sexual marketplace, and there's going to be more virtual reality. There's going to be more, like I said, from that movie Her, where you have an AI type person talking to you. I I think that's going to be very, very common. Like I said, I don't wish that. I don't like to think that way, but you're stuck in 20, 30 years. I think it's going to be a reality from what's going on now. But you also have to look at, if you don't like the dynamic that you're in, and I'm seeing this a lot now where people are doing a lot of complaining about what's available to them, or dating apps, or, for example, there's a lot of videos on how women are all about money in America.
Yep.
Right? Like there's a lot of this, and by the way, those are certain communities. Like there's a podcast called Fresh and Fit, and I've seen it's gotten really popular really quick, and he's got like Rollo Tomassi on there, and he's got different people. And I think they're based out of Miami, and they have these really shallow women that they have come on that are makeup up, and they're interviewing them, and it's like you hear them interviewed, and it's cringeworthy, right? Because the women are like, "Oh my God, like, I would only like go with a guy if he had like, $100,000 in the bank," or so they're having these women on, right? And they're like, look at how bad women are now. Look at how bad women are. Move, look for a new environment, or adapt to the environment you're in. If those are the kind of women that live around your area and you're attracted to, or like I said, it becomes this generalization where guys go, they see that on TV. They see the ridiculous behavior, the attitude they don't like, and they go, "Oh my God, what's happening to women these days? They're horrible. They have these bad attitudes." Change where you're meeting women. Change where you're going out. I think that people are settling for that excuse or dynamic for, I just don't even want to date anymore. I can't stand these gold diggers. I can't stand. That's just you watching a channel where someone's showing that, which is true. It's true, but it's not the world, right? It's like Kevin Samuels is really popular right now, and he's entertaining, he's funny, but women are all about money. He's all about money, by the way. That's not a bad thing. That's who he is, but he dresses in a suit. He's real high class. He's this. We have to remember that some of the people are portraying to you what they want or what they believe, not what is the reality for everyone. So when you think about the sexual marketplace in 20 or 30 years, of course it's going to change, and you'll have to adapt, right? But on the flip side, don't fall into, everything's messed up. You really got to look at your environments and where you're searching out these women, and are you the person of value in your environment that you're going to meet women? And that's why it's interesting to ask you about pickup artists, is because the environment was commonly clubs and bars. Not always, but very commonly. So if you're looking for someone that's into fitness and whatnot, then you'd go to a where you work out, you'd meet women there. So I think that getting back to the question, there's going to be a lot of changes. I don't wish them upon people, but don't get caught up in the idea that all women are a certain way. You're actually saying all women are a certain way that I come across in the environments that I am, and the content that I digest. So I'll let you answer that question if you like.
That becomes a 3-part answer, dude. Without boring people to death. So part of my politics background is I always love reading and studying what societal changes are going to happen. Usually the first aspect of society that changes is comedy. So if you want to understand what direction we're heading in, all you have to do is look at the main underground scene when it comes to comedy. And right now the underground scene is pushing a narrative, and it's pushing a narrative
to be anti-PC culture right now, which is a really interesting aspect because the foundation of PC culture was based on postmodernism, which is the idea of being able to state discrimination exists at a literal level. In other words, our intellectualism is controlled through the use of language. So in order to confirm that people aren't being discriminated against, you then control the means of language, which is why all of a sudden you have the introductions of multiple genders and such. And we've gone through the opposite extreme. So how does this incorporate into sex culture? Well, what is incorporated into the sex culture is, as a result of this counterculture clash, is you've started seeing exposures in society, specifically the exposures of powerful men and how they use their power to manipulate sex from women. This isn't a bad thing. This is a good thing in the sense that we have pointed to an elephant in the corner of the room. But the opposite extreme of this movement is that the instant gratification societal elements that is talked about in postmodernism have manifested themselves via the means of social media. So human brains are used to gratification, dopamine hits, things to promote certain levels of growth, being popular, being sexually abundant, being physically fit. All these elements provide a dopamine boost to us through the brain because there are benefits to it. For example, me being a social guy, being popular ensures that no one is going to bash my brain in, because being that socially confident person that has a lot of power, my friends and family will seek out that person and probably kill them. Okay. What's happened is the creation of social media has caused that hit to happen in our brain consistently. So what's resulted in that is you have one side of the movement, which is the postmodernists, that say, well, the foundations of the social media is the very foundations of the things that we talk about, which is an element of control. Sure, it can be an element of control. But the other aspect is you have a bunch of people that are constantly seeking these dopamine hits. So what ends up happening? People start portraying an image of themselves that doesn't attune to reality. I'm more popular than I think I am. You know what? I'm going to manipulate this picture. This picture is going to have a chest that's 3 times its actual size. My face, I'm going to face tune it. I'm going to turn myself into something I'm not because I am so addicted to this gratification. What's going to result from this is that it's not a sustainable equation and something has to give. What will probably happen is it will probably end up being taxed because it's the only way of actually controlling that element of influence.
What's going to be taxed? I'm sorry, I got to interject. I'm sorry, because
yeah.
What's going to be taxed?
Social media exposure.
Social media exposure is going to be taxed in what way?
Well, you can access Facebook, but if you access it for more than 5 hours, you owe us a tax. If you access it more than 20 hours, you owe us an even higher element of tax. Like, you have to pay for it. It's kind of like what we do with pollution nowadays.
How does this relate to sexual market value in 20, 30 years?
Because social media has definitely has had a very deep-rooted impact on how sex is perceived. This is why I said this is a 3-part answer.
Okay, I'm listening.
Like, the first part is the first part is talking about postmodernism and its element on how it believes literature is in control of things. The second is talking about social media and how that interpretation of literal control has literally manifested itself in modern society to the point where people are no longer authentic. And the third element is the impact on sexual interaction as a result of that. As a direct result of social media influence and other aspects as well, but mainly social media nowadays. Sex and the, I guess you could say the emphasis put on it, such as waiting until, in extreme case, waiting until you're married. But another case would be waiting until you're 20 to have sex with someone, or waiting until you're reasonable age or responsible age no longer applies. Because what's become of society is this instant gratification mentality where I'm just looking for that dopamine hit. So for the next few years, what I expect to happen is I expect to see a very big increase of sexual interactions taking place. But I also expect with regulations coming in, and you're starting to see these in Europe, which basically means they're probably about 10 years away from manifesting in the US. But as you start seeing these regulations come into play where people are limited with how much social media exposure they're subjected to, or at the very least they're taxed on it, so not everyone obsesses over it, you're going to see another experience, which is sort of an enlightenment movement. So what you're talking about, the creation of AI and such, yeah, I can see that happening. But what I see more than likely happening is I see another wave of enlightenment happening in the 21st century, where people are going to put less emphasis on social media gratification and more emphasis on personal development. So it's going to be a case where sex is still going to play a dominant role, and I expect it's going to be more dominant than it is today. But it's not going to be this extreme instant gratification element of just give this to me now. I want this right away. Give it to me. I don't care how it's done. It's going to be more along the lines of I'm going to integrate my identity into my sexuality. So it's going to be a case where I suspect in the next 30 years, it wouldn't be uncommon for friends to have sex. With that being said, it's not like we're going to go back to the 1970s, but it's going to be definitely a case where we're going to live in a society where there's going to be less emphasis on the importance of sex, but also more emphasis on personal development and the spiritual experience. That's where I see this direction going. Mm-hmm. Whether I'm right or not, we'll see in 30 years.
All right, folks, this has been good. I'm going to close it out with that. That was a great answer. Very interesting. I'm at a point where I need to eat. It's lunchtime for me, and I'm on a coffee and sugar fast right now, so I need my food. Rita Rose Hubblesworth, we'll have to retouch on this later. She said, what about, I'm not even going to ask Clutch this because he'll have a long answer.
I don't blame you.
Yeah. No, I'm just like I'm getting to the point where I'm just waning. If I had some coffee, I'd be fine. I'd be humming.
Don't blame this on the substances, dude. You are perfectly capable of keeping going if you want to, but you don't want to. It's okay.
Oh no, I'm tired. All right, folks. It's been great. I just want to thank you, Clutch. If you guys want to check out his channel, The Truth of Love, go check it out. And we'll probably, if it's possible, we'll talk again this week before you go to Orange County because you said you have some extra time. It would be great. We'll unpack another topic.
Sounds great, brother.
All right, folks. It's Curtains. Thank you kindly.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.